WL Shuffle, and today's video is a tier list for the characters in Triangle Strategy, one of my favorite games this year, for sure. It's on Switch and Steam, and I think it's on sale on Steam right now too, so if you want to jump in, it's a good time. Yeah, so I'm going to go through all of the heroes and talk about what I think of them as quick as I can, and it's broken up into a couple sections. We have the characters I don't consider a huge spoiler at the start, and then I space it out, so the next characters we talk about are kind of spoilery, like these are ones you recruit mid-game, late game, your first playthrough and stuff. And then the final characters are super spoilery, so I don't want to, screw anyone up, so you're watching at your own peril at that point. But as far as the criteria goes, we're talking about just general power level, and the things I really focus on when I rate the characters is obviously things like turn manipulation or just anything that breaks game mechanics or action economy and stuff. There's a couple characters that do that. And the other thing I do consider are just, their stats, like how good they are, if they're a tank or a damage dealer. Because at the end of the day, let's say the end of the game, but no, just at the end of the day, as far as the characters are concerned, yeah, there's some characters that, do crazy stuff and give you a bunch of TP or move your characters around. But you still have to kill the enemies. And I'll talk about the characters I think that are very good at that. Okay, now that the intro stuff is out of the way, we start with Serenoa. This is our anime pro tag. I think he's an A tier character. He's not like overpowered. He's not weak by any means. When you first get him, he has Delay Strike, which moves someone's turn back. And that only costs 1 TP, so you can lock down some really troublesome units with that. And then later on, you get Hawk Dive, which if you get the range upgrade, he can really just start sniping stuff from safe distances. And his damage is pretty good. So I think Serenoa is a very solid character. Overall, needs a little bit of speed. I think I stuck accuracy and speed accessories to him for the entire game. That's where I ended up being. Benedict. S doesn't seem S at first. Probably not S for the first little bit of the game. But, mid-game, late-game, extra playthroughs and stuff like that, Benedict gets very, very strong. He doesn't do a lot of on-hit damage, but he is very tanky for just the type of unit that he is. You don't think someone like him would be kind of tanky, but he can actually take some really good punishment, and his buffs are pretty good. They're usually relevant. You can make a lot of stuff happen with them, but later on, when he starts getting upgrades, he gets turn manipulation, so he can make someone take their turn immediately, which is one of your Quietus abilities. So anyone that has pretty much a Quietus ability for a regular ability should be really good, just because it's something that you normally spend, a different resource on. You only get one a fight, and this is something that can do it all the time. And so Benedict is one of those characters. He can make someone take their turn immediately, or he can make someone get 2 actions, like 2 turns in 1 turn, which is really good. And then his final ability is a group invincibility buff. It makes the 5-person cross. And that's really good too, especially on hard, because some enemies hit just ridiculously hard and you can space them to the point where the invincibility soaks up the most dangerous hit. But you're not immune to status, I think. So those sparks that do 350 damage are going to still paralyze you. Otherwise, really good character, can get in there and scrap with the best of them, can set up flanks, does enough damage to be relevant. And the buffs are good. I like Benedict a lot. Frederica, also S. I feel like this one is people will disagree with this one, but Frederica is, again, in that other category I talked about. Someone has to kill units, like the enemy soldiers, at some point, and she's really good at that. So she does pretty good damage with a lot of her skills. Her upgraded skills, you don't need too much. Like Pillar of Fire is okay. Sunfall is almost a waste of TP. I don't know, I have to double check the math, but Scorch and Blazing Chains do enough to get you through things. The other reason I like her a lot is because she gets TP when she KOs a unit, so she's able to actually take something down. She'll get an extra TP, so she can keep casting spells each turn if you're feeding them to her. So as long as you're leaving people around, 25-30% of their life, she can just snipe them and keep going. And there's another accessory you get later called the Red Anklet, where she gets bonus, or whoever you give it to gets bonus damage for killing a unit. And so she can just have that as permanent uptime. It's a really good set of skills that she, or passives I should say, that she has. She does fire damage, which is probably the best damage type in the game. It's either that or electricity, but you know, she does really good damage with the fire, and she's a great farmer because you can give her this, she can do AoE damage and, you know, help kill units with the accessory that makes enemies drop extra items. I like her. I think she's fantastic. And let's see, Roland is a best buddies with Serenoa, not just like in game, but the two of them are really good to just kind of run around the battlefield together and flank and get follow-up attacks and just do consistent good damage. Like the two of these dudes can take down most units in like 1 or 2 turns together, and not bosses, but you know, just any other unit out there, and that's really good. So they're pretty strong. Roland is very mobile, and he's definitely weak defensively, so he's someone that has to make a lot of use of his range, but also he has this passive called opportunity attack, so if he moves 5 or more spaces, he gets a free hit. I don't think you can aim it, so it's a bit weird if you run into like a group of people or 2 people or something, because it'll target someone. His damage output is really good. He's decently fast, and he gets like bonus damage for crit and stuff, I think. Good unit, not overpowering, but pretty strong. Gila. Most of you on your first playthrough might think she's S tier, but really think about how she's the only healer you get. It's very hard to get an additional healer in this game. We'll talk about, you know, that when it's relevant, but Gila, she's okay. Her healing output is strong. It's strong enough it gets you through what you need to. She has status cleanse, which is really good. She has an area heal. Scrape the desk, I'm sorry about that. And then she has an auto revive at the end of her talent tree or skills or whatever. And the auto revive is pretty good. The issue with Gila is she cannot regenerate her TP easily. It got to the point where when I was playing that, I thought giving her haste was almost just a waste, because I'd spend the TP, I wouldn't have it available to do, you know, a big heal or an auto revive later on, like 1 or 2 turns later. Even though you get bonus speed, it just didn't feel worth it. So with Gila, she's okay. She gets much better later because you get the auto revive, and I think she gets increased range, and that kind of ups her stock. But otherwise, she's good. She's not great. She feels better than she is because there are no other healers that you have access to, at least at first. Anna is one of my favorite characters, so I'm kind of sad to put her down there. She's the quintessential rogue, and she can do really well in some levels, but not in others. Her damage output is okay. Most of her big damage comes from being able to sneak up on someone and flank them with someone else. So she gets the double attack, and then you get 2 follow-ups and stuff, so she can put out a lot of damage there. She gets bonus damage for being in stealth, and I think back attack damage as well. But Anna's issue is she's not too sturdy. You know, she dies to mages, which is something that is a big issue. She'll have a lot of turns where she doesn't really do anything. Between remain and recover, which is her way to heal herself, means she can't do anything. She has to stand there and take no action to heal. And then also, you have to really be careful about where you're putting her if you're trying to send her to the back to assassinate people. There is 1 or 2 objective missions in the game. I'm thinking of chapter 16 specifically, where she is probably the best unit just because of stealth. So she can break some fights, but otherwise not the most dominating performance, but I do like her. Like I said, she's one of my favorites. Probably like my top 3, honestly. Eredor. Eredor is kind of weak early. I shouldn't say weak, but he's like decent early, but he gets really good later when he gets access to his weapon skill, which is King Shield. And King Shield is a 100% chance to infuriate targets, and then he gets invincibility for the entire turn. So he can get hit 1,000 times, and that shield is not popping. So what makes this really good is the fact that the provoke goes 2 spaces like the regular version, and he's a pretty slow unit. So him going slow means he gets more uptime on the shield, which I know might be weird to think about, but this really lets him bait out multiple attacks from certain units that are very fast, or mages that like to, you know, go fast and zap him. So he's mage food for the most part, but like if you have King Shield or some other form of invincibility, he can run in there and the mage will usually favor hitting him because they'll do the most damage to him, and so he'll soak it and take nothing for it. He's really good, and he can shove people, which is relevant in a lot of maps, and provokes good enough. He does okay damage. He's a pretty well-rounded unit. He's mobile enough, he can do enough damage, and the lockdown tanking capabilities that he has are very good, as well as the disruption from pushing. So I think he's good. Huet is S. So again, doesn't break the game in terms of multiple turns or, you know, other crazy stuff that is possible. Huet just does good damage, not insane damage, good damage, but she is so freaking mobile with the ability to fly that there are a lot of fights that she can, you know, screw with the AI on by being able to fly onto a building or a ledge that someone can't get to and still shoot them. So you can kind of like bait them, they run towards you because you're on the ground, and then you fly up to something and just shoot them, and they're just wasting time running back and forth. There are a couple hard fights in the game that after you get rid of all the range units on the enemy side, so all the mages, the archers, and ideally the healers, Huet can solo the rest of the fight just by sitting on buildings and shooting people. Like some of the hardest fights in the game, she can wrap up if you're losing units because she can just sit on a building. So I think she's insane. I think she's a very strong unit, and I probably used her the most in my first playthrough. I don't think there was many fights where I didn't use her, and I couldn't think of too many fights where she wasn't even worth using in general. And you get her at the start for the most part, so very good archer, flying, sniper unit. Go figure, that's a good combination. So these are the starter heroes, and then this is the end of the minor spoiler section here. So I don't consider these like I don't even consider these spoilers. You get these in chapter 3. So depending on which way you go to Hyzant, you get Corentin. And so I think Corentin is C. Corentin is a character I'm actually going back to correct on the tier list. I originally put him in C, and after playing him more for background footage and really thinking about it and stuff, I don't think C is quite fair for him. So I'm going to move him up to A. Yeah, I think we can do A. I'm between A and B. He's like a really low A or a very high B to me. The first reason I take points from him is because Ice Wall does not scale, and the Ice Wall is always 50 HP. At the start of the game, this is fine, you know, 50 HP is quite a lot, but it never goes up. I don't know if that's an oversight or what, but you would assume that someone who's getting stronger as a mage would have a stronger Ice Wall. The next reason he loses a couple points is because he's really TP hungry until pretty mid to late game, where he can stand on ice to regenerate TP. But your early medals are highly contested, so giving one to Corentin may not be your first priority. And the final negative is that ice is good for battlefield control, but it also hinders your own playstyle. He's not like Frederica, where you can just plop him on any map and he's going to just annihilate everything. You have to be very careful with your ice placement because it can mess you up, not just the enemy. Those negatives sound pretty hefty, and they do matter. However, I also think that Corentin is one of the few actual mages you get in the game, so that should account for something. The other thing too is that ice is such a common attack from the enemy, and Corentin resists that, so that gives him a little bit of survivability, and fire isn't too common to fight against. Even though his TP regeneration comes online later than Frederica, his is more reliable because you don't have to feed him kills consistently to stay afloat like Frederica. Instead, Corentin is a unit that can just stand on a patch of ice, and if you have enough of a barricade or a buffer and people just keep rushing you, he can just stand there and fire off every turn. He gets an early silence on Frosty Fetters, which is really nice, and later on he gets Shield of Ice, which is another form of invincibility. With all that, I think he is an A tier unit, which I'm coming around to that pretty late. I apologize about that. So for the rest of the video, when you see Corentin and C, understand that I did do my research and had a change of opinion. This is also a great way to bait people that are going to talk about Corentin being C tier and complaining at me, because I will know they just skipped to the end of the video and did not watch this part. So I'm looking forward to that interaction. All right, Rudolph. I got Corentin my first playthrough, so I got Rudolph my second playthrough, so it was a bit odd using him at first because I had to like level up everything he had right away to make use of him. But Rudolph is cool. He has traps, he has sleep arrow, he has rain of arrows. He knew some pretty decent damage. His accuracy is pretty abysmal at the start, but you know, once you get the ability to let him stand there and boost his accuracy, or you give him accuracy accessories, he can hit things pretty consistently. He's kind of slow too, but if he kills a unit, he gets a huge speed boost. So he's a unit that's a lot like Frederica, where if he can just stand there and continually just like pick off kills every single turn, you're gonna see a few units like this in this list. But there are a few units that if they can stand there and get a kill every turn or every 2 turns or something like that, they're actually really good. Rudolph is in that camp, but physical damage is so plentiful that it doesn't make him as strong as Frederica. Otherwise, the maps where the steel traps are good can be very good, because once the enemy hits it, that's the end of their turn. So if they run over it and they're gonna attack you, then they don't get to attack you. They just hit the trap and that's it. And then Slumber Arrow is pretty good. And then, like I said, his other abilities are decent. Straight Shot, hard to set up, but pretty good damage. I like Rudolph, but compared to the other archers, he's not as good. You know, actually just looking at the rest of the list, he might be the worst archer, which is strange because he's not a bad character. So that's the end of the safe section. So coming up are the minor spoilers. So if you are worried about seeing who else you're able to recruit in the game, besides the super spoiler characters, this is probably your time to dip out, but I think you don't care if you're still watching at this point. So we're gonna scroll down just a bit. Got 1 row, got 2 rows. Julio is, where did I put Julio? Hey, he was going between A and B for me for a while. Julio is pretty tanky with his TP barrier, which is nice. He can do physical and magical damage, so he has a pretty decent answer to anyone he's swinging at, which I like. And he can dump all of his TP on another unit. So he's like the biggest battery in the game. So that's really where he shines, is being able to take a couple hits. He's a good off tank. He's decent melee damage, but you're really bringing him for his ability to, you know, manipulate the enemy's TP or your allies. And that's really what makes him good. The fact that he can just dump, you know, 3, 4, 5 TP on someone at any given time is a huge boost. And that's really where he shines in a lot of teams. Not much else to say. He's just a melee guy that gives out a lot of TP, and he's pretty tanky. Hasabara. I really like Haas in terms of what she can do, but the stats just aren't there to support it. She's not great defensively for a unit that wants to be up front, because she has follow-up attacks to heal the person she's following up with when you're attacking. So she really wants to get in there and flank, but she doesn't have the stats to actually get in there and flank. And the heal from the follow-up isn't that strong. I think it's like 10% of their HP or something, or it might just be like a flat 50 at the end of the game. So it's not great. She does pretty good damage because she gets more damage per TP that she has. So cleave can hit kind of hard. She can push people, like push enemies around. Not as good as Eridor, but you know, still good enough to have. And she can heal multiple units, so you get her kind of early. She's not as good as Gila as a healer, but it's still nice to have someone else that can heal. And the other thing that's really good about her is Catapult, which is her weapon skill. That is pretty good. She can throw units that have trouble getting into the fray, like Eridor and stuff, and they can do really good work, and they get buffed for doing it. So really, you can save up Eridor's TP for a King Shield and then catapult him into the back line of a group, and that's pretty cool. Like, that's fun to do. So she's got some utility. She's just not the unit that goes up there and gets hit like 4 times. Even though she has desperate defense and stuff like that, it just doesn't, like, the way that they're trying to have you use her just doesn't translate into how she's capable. And it's a bit sad, but I do like her, just not there statistically. Narv. This kid, we're gonna put him up in A. So Narv is decent in terms of damage. He doesn't have TP regeneration, but the reason I value him so highly is he can heal. He has Sanctuary, so his heal's 2 points. So he's someone else that can heal with Gila, which is really good to have, especially early. And he has access to all types of magic. So he can do electricity, fire, ice, and wind. He has everything. And then also his weapon skill, the Mystic Beam, is all right. I didn't use it too much, but it's okay. And the best thing about him is that he has a passive where he gets 1 extra range. So having a mage that can hit 5 tiles is actually insane. Like, it doesn't seem too much at first, but the ability to shoot so far with things like Spark and, you know, Scorch and stuff is so helpful. You know, it keeps them safe. It picks off units that most other characters might have trouble getting to. And it's just really good. It's really good. And you can get them decently early. So I used Narv a lot early on in my first playthrough. And later on, I kind of shied away from him. But he's good. He gets the job done. Ians. This dude can be S on some maps. But like the maps where he doesn't destroy them, he's actually C. So I think I'm going to put him in B. I was originally going to put him in C, but I feel like that's too low. He's decently durable. He's very mobile between being able to move, you know, 5-6 spaces and ladders and stuff. So, and you can swap him in to have extra jump and stuff like that. So he's pretty mobile. He's good. He can take a couple hits, which is nice. He doesn't do a ton of damage. His automatic turret is kind of mediocre. Like even units that it was favored to hit, it just seemed like it couldn't hit stuff. But the thing that makes him really, really good is he has the constricting net, so he can delay turns on the enemies, which can be helpful, just like Serenoa. And he has Springtrap. The maps where you can make use of Springtrap just like essentially kill enemies before they're actually dead. Like it just removes them from the game. It's like permanently stunning them. It's so nuts, and you can just do crazy stuff, you know, keep them off the bridges or off cliffs. You know, there's just so much stuff you can do with Springtrap. Where I feel his best upgrade is the one that lowers the TP cost to 1, so you can do it each turn. Like that, this character got way better once I had that unlocked. And there are a couple maps where your units can't easily get up, like a cliff or something, unless you have Ians to put up a ladder. And if you can put up a ladder, there are some maps that just break instantly because, you know, the game gives you the option to go that way, but it doesn't really think you're going to. It puts the enemies on like the other side or something. Or the enemy tries to go down the ladder after you, and you can just block the ladder from the bottom, or build another ladder to break it, and then that ladder's gone, so they're all trapped up there. He can do a lot of stuff that really screws with the game's AI, and he can do a lot of things that get your team places that they normally can't go. Not every map is an Ian's map, but all the maps that are Ian's maps, he is like S tier. So I guess B is a decent spot for him, but I like this character. I always have fun playing him. I will say that much. Let's see, Lionel. A. Lionel doesn't seem like an A tier unit at first, but his success rate on Infuriate is pretty decent. The temptation ability he has is kind of a trap. The first one, his weapon skill one is good if you have the money. His really good abilities, you know, super late game, and that's Endless Speech, which lets him sleep and silence a group of enemies. And honestly, just getting one of those to go off is usually enough to be very disruptive. And he's really tanky, all things considered. You know, he can taunt things to attack him, and then he can actually take a couple hits. Lionel is a solid unit, and he doesn't really shine on some fights. Like, what you're supposed to do with him is to taunt the healers and the mages, because he can do it from such a big range that you run up, you taunt the enemy mage or the enemy healer, and you're like, you know, 3 spaces away, or you have an ally in front of you, and it's really hard for them to get there, so they just start wasting turns. And you can just soft lock certain backline units if you keep getting the taunt to go through. So he's cool. An expensive character though with the final skill, so I've only used it a handful of times. Who's next? Piccoletta. This might be the worst character in the game. Very cool conceptually. She's, you know, mobile. She's supposed to be an acrobat. She has the decoy. She can copy enemies' abilities and stuff. It's just, she's very, very, very weak defensively. She can copy enemies' abilities, which sometimes, you know, they don't give you something good to use, but, you know, whatever. And I think the biggest thing that sucks with this character is that you can't control the decoy that she makes. The decoy literally counts as another unit. It takes turns, it moves, it tries to flank sometimes, and all of that is very cool, but you can't control it, and it's on a different turn than you, and then eventually its turns get spaced out, so it's not immediately after Piccoletta. So it's really just ends up not being that good, and it kind of stops scaling at some point. I don't know when it happens, but I remember her at level 50, Piccoletta has like about 450 HP, and the decoy had about 300 and something, and the decoy dies in 2 hits, and it's just kind of, it feels like a waste. And also the decoy ends up going from trying to flank with you to get follow-up hits to just kind of staying 3 tiles away and using ball toss. Overall, it just ends up not being a good cohesive experience, at least to me. So I wanted her to be better. She sadly ends up not getting there. It just, there's no damage. The utility is pretty low, and she doesn't really have the defenses to do much. So I actually might say she's the worst, sadly. Now we have another S tier unit coming up. We have Medina. Medina will not seem S tier at first because she requires items to use because she's a medic. So she throws items at people. It's like the chemist from FF Tactics. So she's expensive. You don't want to run her because items and money are very hard to come by your first few playthroughs. So she probably sits on the bench. She sat on my bench. However, with upgrades and a huge item pool, she is an incredibly insane character. She can give you extra turns, or she can move your turn up to hers. She can heal everyone on the map with the Celestial Salve or whatever it's called. She can give everyone TP, or people TP that she hits with her items. She can use multiple items in a turn. She has range on items. She's pretty fast. She gets a couple speed nodes in her upgrade path, and so she can run around and do stuff. And like just being able to use double items on the range recovery pellet, which is the area effect one, she can throw 2 TP on a group of people per turn, you know, if she can keep her own TP up to make use of that. That's insane. She's got huge battery potential. She gets bonus healing off of items too. She can find items from spoils, so she can kind of resupply herself. So it's like, if you can give her the items to throw, she is an insane character. She's definitely one of the best in the game. Her value doesn't appear until much later, but if you put the time into her, she's very good. All right, next up, who's this? Azara, I think her name is, or Araza? No, I think it's Azara. I like this unit. I was hoping she'd be better. Her paralyzed chance on her Thunderstrike or whatever is really good. So it's much higher than Narv's. It's like double what Narv's is. So she can have like a 50-60% chance to paralyze someone for 2 turns. That's pretty good. She can give everyone luck for 1 point for 1 TP, which is nice. And she's the only other character that has a wind spell. Wind doesn't come into play too much, but it has the potential to hit the most enemies at a time. It can hit, I think, 7. So the wind attack is pretty good, and it turns them around so your melee units can get in there and hit them in the back. So she's got some cool stuff she can do, but her stats aren't great. Her damage itself isn't great. She can control the weather, which is marginally useful. Oftentimes, you know, making it rain and then having spark can shock your own units because you don't control where the rain goes and stuff like that. So it feels a bit chaotic. It honestly just isn't great to use sometimes. Although there's some maps where fire is a big issue, so being able to rain out the fire can be nice. The other thing she can do is cause a tempest, which messes with bow accuracy. This never really felt important because because it affects your own units too, first of all. Second, a lot of the levels where bows are a huge hindrance for you, the archers are on high ground. Like, they start on high ground. There's a few levels like that. And them getting the bonus accuracy from being up high doesn't seem to matter too much with Tempest. So it almost feels like a waste of an ability to hit that. I've tried to make it work a few times, and it's nice when it goes off. You know, it's nice when you see an archer just brick, you know, 2 times and stuff. But, you know, there are other ways to deal with that. You know, sending out tanks that can soak it up easily, sending out Huet to blind them and stuff like that. So the Tempest is all right. And then her final skill, Thunderstorm, which, you know, takes all of her TP, is pretty bad. It takes all of her TP, it takes a turn to get off, it doesn't even have 100% accuracy. So it's like, you zap every enemy on the field, and when you do that, you know, you have like a 15, 20, 25, I forget what the exact number is, percent chance to hit them, and then you have a small chance to paralyze them. If you high roll it and you know, hit 6 things and stun 3 of them, then yeah, it seems insane. But that doesn't usually happen because you have to get to 5 TP, which is pretty hard to do on the first couple turns without like a dedicated battery. And then you have to spend an extra turn casting it. And then, you know, at that point, your team's already killing a few things, so you're not hitting everything. So it's a bit of a waste. But she's a really cool unit, just doesn't have too much effectiveness. Like, she's definitely worse at killing stuff than Frederica and Narv. But, you know, she gets the bonus paralyzed chance, which has been pretty clutch for me sometimes. Archibald. I like Archibald. He definitely needs his passives from upgrading his stuff. He's a pretty expensive character to upgrade to because he doesn't have any picks. Like, he doesn't have a either or skill, so really you have to buy everything on him. But otherwise, yeah, if he can just stand there and shoot, there are a few levels where he can stand on, you know, a high place and shoot things. He's good. He's really good. And his skills are pretty solid. He has a lot of range. He has a lot of damage. And he has things like Inescapable Arrow, which is cool. And so I ended up giving him a setup where he can't even regenerate TP. And he just gets a bunch of bonus damage, like bonus stats. And that's all I used him for, was just sit there, you know, pop things for 100 and something. And sometimes insta-kill them. His insta-kill chance is pretty high. You know, it gets up to 50. Which, at first, when you see a lot of the bosses on your first playthrough, you're like, why do they have insta-kill protection? I have no one that can do that. But then later, you get a few units that can. And Archibald's the best one for it. So, he's pretty solid if you can just let him stand there and shoot. Not much else to say. Who's next? Decimal. Decimal's B. Like, Decimal can pop off and hit a few things at once every turn, and that can be really cool. Like, if it's hitting 3 or 4 units at a time, it can actually put out a lot of damage. Or have, you know, the random insta-kill chance. The issue is the Decimal can have some really awful turns. And, you know, like, you can try and set it up to where, you know, you look at your damage on every attack and go, okay, Decimal's going to do really well if I just wait, you know, let this person get down to multiple 3 or 4 or whatever. But sometimes you don't have that option, and sometimes it's not even worth doing that. And so Decimal can have turns where it only hits 1 unit or no unit, even though it's, you know, got access to like 7. And the turns that could be really good for it, you're out of TP, because, you know, the last turn was pretty good, but the next turn's better. And then all of a sudden Decimal, you know, just has to sit there and charge. So Decimal has got some weird, awkward turns, but the fights that it can do pretty well in, it does good, you know. So I do like it, just a little clunky, has a few bad turns, and not great on every single map. And the damage output, like, per hit is kind of low compared to the other mages. Like, Decimal's supposed to hit, you know, 5 things at a time. That's when it shines. Giovanna. I really wanted to like Giovanna. She's almost, like, worse than Piccoletta in some cases. I don't know if people's heads are snapping at that one, but the reason I don't value her too highly is that all the environmental stuff is really cool, but it's very hard to set up. Like, unless you're going to carry around oil jugs and Frederica or firestones every fight, it's very hard for her to get onto fire to burn stuff. The ice is probably the easiest for her to use, so she has some synergy with Corentin or some of the other fights against Esfrost soldiers. And then Rock Toss is okay. Gaia's Roar, though, her weapon seal is actually really good because it goes all the way across the map. If they're not too high or too low, it has basically infinite range. So levels that have, you know, long corridors or bridges and stuff like that, she can just sit there and literally hit all the way down the map. And that's pretty fun. But you don't get to do that too often. So she's okay. Like, her damage is okay and stuff. It's just, it's so much setup to get use out of her, and it's pretty hard to make her super good. The one thing I was really sad about is her heal Splash. She needs to be on water to use it. It costs 2 TP. So if you want to run her with Azara and, you know, rain on the field, you know, she runs over and does 2 TP for a heal that's like weaker than freaking Hasabara's Be Brave. It just feels bad. It feels bad when you do that. She's very mobile though. Probably the most mobile unit in the entire game that's not a flying unit. So she can do some stuff. She has enough stats to, like, get in there and, you know, scrap a little bit, but kinda, I feel like she's a bit of missed potential. Feels like she was a late addition to the dev team, and they didn't quite know what to do with her. But she's cool. Now, we come to probably the best character in the entire game, is Quahog. This dude, this dude has all of the game-breaking stuff in one package. So Quahog can teleport you, like your allies. He can teleport himself. He can teleport the enemies. He can swap spots with the enemies. He can stop time. He can rewind characters back to their previous position and health. So if, you know, someone needs to get healed up, he can just rewind them back to last turn. They go back, you know, 3 spaces because they got ganged up on, and then heal to full for 2 points. He also has haste, much like Gila. He's also incredibly fast. He gets 3 speed nodes on his upgrade path. He can get up to like, 30 something speed. He can also get final upgrades where he gets more mobility, so he can get extra movement and jump. Like, this kid is so mobile. He's so fast. He can cycle turns. His one attack skill in due course does proportional damage, which is kind of weak on regular enemies, but it does a ton of damage to bosses. So if bosses are difficult for you, you can have Quahog go on there, and he's fast enough to keep up with them. And he can just keep hitting them for, like 20-25% of the life or whatever it is every turn. His other stuff, honestly, his least used skill for me was the rewind time. Just because I don't think it revives people when you rewind time, which would have been really good. There's other stuff you can do with this TP that it never really gets to the point where you have to rewind an entire turn. With stop time too. Doesn't seem like it's really good at first, because it's like, okay, Quahog's the only person that can move, everyone else is stuck for 2 turns. First of all, it can't be resisted, which is great. Second, even though everything is stopped, all of the buffs and debuffs and TP changes are still happening, even though no one gets to do anything yet. So if you're in a really bad position, like the enemy, put you in a bad spot, you're really low on TP, you got hit by a devastating status that you want to have, run the course, or the enemy has some buffs that you can't deal with that moment, or they have a bunch of TP and you don't. Like, Quahog can stop time, and your TP is going to regenerate, the buffs are going to run the course, regeneration will, keep going on you, so if you need a couple turns to heal, it's really good, you get your TP back. The enemy runs out of buffs. Like, there's so many crazy things you can do with stopping time that it's fun to do. It's a huge playmaking skill. So like, there's just really nothing Quahog can't do. He can fit on pretty much any team in every situation. I think it's going to be really hard for anyone to argue against this character not being the best, if not one of the best. If you're saying, oh, so-and-so might be better and Quahog's second, I guess. But saying Quahog isn't like a top 3, I don't know. Playing a different game at that point. So he's really, 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 really good. You get him super late too. Roma, another one of my favorite characters. Let's say she's B. You could argue C. Roma is someone that she's an evasion tank. She can taunt. She's pretty quick. She's very mobile. She can run through units, and she does okay damage. And she has Skyward Fist, which is pretty good. So she and her TP, she's one of the few characters that isn't really TP starved, where like, other characters can pop off for a few turns and then have a couple bad turns where they have to wait or move. Roma just kind of keeps going. Unless you're spamming Skyward Fist, she really just doesn't slow down, which is cool. And she's very fun. I think she's really fun to play. And so her best thing to do is go into levels where there aren't a lot of mages, like 1 or 2 mages max. So she can try and dodge tank all the martial characters, or run to the back and taunt the mages so they're stuck hitting her. And everyone else tries to come back and, hit her, and then you're just stuck there dodging everything, punching everything. The issue with Groma is that she gets hit twice, she dies. She gets hit by a mage resists an infuriate, she dies. So she really has to thread the needle. And she's also another character much like Frederica, where she gets bonus evasion for killing a unit, so she has to get a kill, like early. So if she can run into a fray of enemies, pick off an early kill, she's usually okay for a while. But if she can't get that, or she gets hit by a mage, she's in trouble. So as much as I like her, she's really fun, does okay damage. The skills are pretty cool and fun. She can lock down backline units really well. It's the RNG on the dodge is just sadly... Actually, the RNG on the dodge isn't even a huge deal. It's the fact she has like 400 HP at max level. So like, having that little HP compared to the rest of the cast having, 450, 500 is a big detriment. When she pops off though. Like, she can do some insane stuff, but having her survive sometimes is not good enough. Okay, this is the character that's probably in the running for the worst alongside Piccoletta, and that's Flanagan. Flanagan is just such a disappointment. You have this huge defensive presence. He takes half damage getting hit in the front. He has the ability to taunt. He's kind of mobile. He can fly. He can dive bomb and stuff. Overall, it just doesn't show up for him. He just kind of sits there. It's like, there are other units that can run up and just sit there, So it's It's a bit sad. I think some things that would help him would be like if his aerial dive triggered follow-up attacks, so he can like run into frays, get behind units, trigger follow-up damage. Like that could be good. He doesn't have that, I think. He still dies to mages. Like just like Eridor, he dies to mages, but it's much harder for him to take the hit, whereas Eridor can go invincible for a turn. Kind of sad about that. Really cool unit, just doesn't translate well overall. Okay. That's it for the slight spoiler section. The massive spoiler section, these are units that I don't know if you want to know you can get them or not, so I'm going to give you a sec to jump out. All right. In case you're still here, this is the massive spoiler section. The first unit from our massive spoiler section, I'm not even going to scroll down just in case people, you know, mess up and don't close the video or something, but first one is Cordelia. Roland's sister, a character I didn't even expect you could play. It just never seemed like you'd be able to play her, but then you get to the mission in chapter 15 where you can recruit her and it's like, oh, yes, I can play her. And she's an insane healer. She has the most healing output, I would say, of the cast. And even though she's pretty brittle, like she doesn't have great defenses, she has so much range on her heals. I think she can heal 6 spaces away that you can just camp her somewhere and no one can get to her anyway. Like there are very few maps where the enemy can put enough pressure on you where Cordelia can't keep herself far enough away to be safe. So she's really good for that. She can put out regen on characters to keep them alive on off turns, which is really nice. She can give your other units evasion buffs, which can be helpful. She can heal for a really big amount on a single target. She can area heal. She can't cure status like Gila. That's like her one weakness. Her other ability, she can heal while taking half her own damage, which is actually okay because, like I said, it's kind of hard for enemies to hit her. So if they have trouble hitting her, she can heal for free and keep herself generating TP over turns. And then her weapon skill is an overheal, which is above and beyond, I think it's called. And you can just heal units with, you know, you can overheal them and just give them shields essentially. So whereas Gila can auto res, Cordelia can prevent you from having to res at all. So you can, you know, at level 50 you can have your tanks at 900 HP. You know, it's pretty easy to do that, and I don't think it has a cap because you can keep throwing it on them and then they just overheal into the question mark territory. So it's nuts. And then the final thing that makes her really, really good is that she can regenerate TP for not moving. So between being able to not spend TP on healing and then also regenerate TP while not moving, she can pump out a lot of effective healing, and then she'll always have TP on deck to do something big if she needs to, whereas Gila doesn't. Since Gila can't regenerate TP, her auto res gets a bit worse, whereas Cordelia can put out an auto res every like 2 to 4 turns very easily if you let her do it without a battery. So I love Cordelia. The moment I got her, she was in pretty much every fight that I had. The only times I took her out would be just to see if I could do it without her, and it felt weird. I'm gonna be honest, it felt very weird to not have her, but she's a very strong unit. Let's see. Travis is cool. I wish Travis was a bit better. His mug ability is decent enough. Like, you know, it has a pretty good chance to steal at about 40%. And he has a cleave, an area effect attack, you know, that can delay people, which is nice. He hits decently hard. He's got like good fire res at the end. So he's got some good stuff. It's just, you know, you have all these other units that can just, you know, be frontliners by the time you get them. You know, you have Roland, he's more defensive than Roland, which is nice. You have Serenoa, you have Benedict, you have, you know, your tanks, you have Lionel if you want to throw him out there, you have terrain choke points. Like there aren't too many situations where you need like, you know, 6 frontline units, but Travis is still good. He's fun. He can disrupt things with back toss, so he's cool. Like there's nothing really negative to say about him. It's just he's solid, you know. So solid doesn't mean super high tier placement, sadly. Trish, on the other hand, the daughter of Travis, she is really good. She's fun to use. She can get extra turns through Act Twice, which she can even do on turn 1, where most fights turn 1 isn't too action intensive. So the fact that she can give herself Act Twice on turn 1 and move into position, and then on turn 2 she's getting all those extra turns, is really cool. And she has pretty good damage. She can steal with her normal attack, and she's pretty mobile with leap. So Trish just does a lot of things pretty well. And she's almost like a slightly, she's like Huette in a lot of ways. She doesn't have the status effects or the range that Huette does, but she's almost as mobile as Huette with the ability to jump. So I like Trish. I think she's fantastic. I ended up using her quite a lot near the end on my my playthroughs after I got her. So I like her. She's good. Milo. Where did I put you, Milo? B? Yeah. Milo, she's so close to being like broken, dude. She's really good, except for two things. One, she doesn't have a way to regenerate her TP like some of the other characters who excel at doing crazy stuff do. You know, like Frederica can regenerate TP every time she kills stuff. Medina can give people TP. Cordelia can regenerate it. Quahog's fast enough to cycle. But Milo, the big issue, she can't regenerate TP. In Moonjump, her main movement ability will always cost TP. There's no upgrade for Moonjump that takes away the TP cost, which I think is very strange. That seems like a really good upgrade for her to get. And so she's just not, like, she can be mobile, but then she doesn't have the TP to do anything. You know, like, you Moonjump, do something, or you run in and do stuff like Temptation and then try and Moonjump out later and stuff like that. She's just not gonna have the TP to do it. And so she has these turns where it's like, she just kind of stands there and hits them with her weak fan attack because you're trying to save up TP for something good or like a combo, and she just can't do it. It's a bit sad in that regard, but she can steal TP and weaken enemies, which is really good. She has two forms of Temptation, and those are very good, but again, her TP regeneration isn't stellar, so if you can put her with a battery, she can do a lot of cool stuff, but if you don't have someone feeding her TP every turn or every other turn or something like that, or the battle's not spread out enough to where she can like do some stuff, spend 2 turns running to the other side to do other stuff, you know, she's just gonna fall behind and have some really awkward bad turns. She's a good evasion unit. She's up there with like Groma and Piccoletta in terms of evasion, so you can do that. Bit of a missed opportunity, and I really think it comes down to Moonjump. If Moonjump was a free to use ability, I think she would be fine, but she doesn't have that, which is regrettable. All right, massive mega spoilers for our last 2 characters. Maxwell the Dawn Spear. So Maxwell dies in the story, but it was pretty clear he didn't actually die. It's just like, when do I get him back? And it's a bit tricky to get him. You have to protect the Roselle in, I think, chapter 11, and then you have to have the stat requirements from your convictions to have him show up. But Maxwell is very good. He does a ton of damage. He's really mobile. He's like fast enough to, you know, be kind of constantly threatening things, and he has revive. The fact he has an auto revive at all times, like, you know, for every fight he gets one, is ridiculous. Like, that lets him do some really risky stuff. He can, you know, high jump into places, or, you know, go for kills that most people have to let go, and he can just do some really crazy stuff. He's a very good unit, and he can regenerate his own TP by hitting multiple things with his attacks. So if you use high jump or rush through or whatever it's called, or even just the basic melee attack and hit 2 things at a time, he can charge his TP up very quickly, so it's pretty cool. He's really fun to use, does a lot of damage, mobile, free revive, really nothing bad about this character. You know, it feels like once you get him, if you put him on every fight, the fight just gets easier. And then our final character, which I wasn't sure if we'd be able to get her, but it's Avlora. And so I'm going to put Avlora in A. I was hoping she'd be an S tier unit, you know, considering you have to do the true ending route to get her. She's at the very end. I was really expecting this character to be insane. And she is good. She's probably great, honestly, don't get me wrong. But the issue is, like, when you fight her as a boss character, she's so much stronger. So much stronger as a boss character that seeing her as a regular unit is a bit unfortunate. And she does get stronger when she's taking damage, which is nice, but it's really hard to keep someone, especially if you're playing on hard, to keep them low HP but not dead, you know. So she's good though, and Bloody Cross is a really good ability, but yeah, it's just really hard to get the effectiveness out of Desperate Strike. And she's not like super fast or whatever. She's just really good. She's really good in terms of damage and stuff. Just not game breaking in terms of what she's capable of, sadly. So everyone fit on the mat or on the screen too. That's good. All right, so that's it for, zoom out a little bit. That's it for the tier list. Thank you, everyone. Hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you're thinking down below in the comments. I had a lot of fun doing this. Let me see if I can, yeah, Triangle Strategy, one of my favorite games. Really happy to make content for it. So let me know what you're thinking. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.